You can waste years trying to figure leadership out on your own, years falling behind, years not knowing why you aren't getting the results you expect. Nowadays, there's more leadership content than ever, and most firefighters and officers are drowning in it and still not making progress. That's why we created the Fireground Company membership. This membership isn't for everyone. It's for firefighters and officers who refuse to be average. Once you join, you gain access to the Insider Podcast, Leadership Q&A, where we answer the questions you submit to us, discussion feeds, private resources, exclusive discounts, and more. Right now, we have a founding member discount for the first 50 members to join. Visit firegroundcompany.com before this offer is gone.
On today's episode of the Fireground Company podcast, we discuss moving charged hose line and the challenges of stairs.
The Fireground Company podcast.
All right, it's recording. All right, so this episode, I think if you're listening in order, which I don't know if anybody actually listens to these in order, but if you're listening in order, the last one was our America, Eagles,
250 years,
250
Independence
years.
Day, kind of before that. I guess it airs a few days before that, but the history of the fire department, or three symbols of the fire department.
Yeah, and that one was very history, culture. Today we're gonna take another turn, and we're gonna go pretty tactical, operations focused here, and we are talking about hose on stairs, which seems like a really specific topic, but we have found, I think it's fair to say, that stairs become a real challenge. And they're everywhere. You know, we encounter it so frequently. But we practice stretching and moving hose a lot on flat ground, in parking lots, outside burn buildings, things like that. When we do move hose around obstacles, it's very often just around, again, sort of flat, going around corners and things like that, which is all great and everything. But stairs present some unique challenges in moving hose, stretching hose, everything like that, and it's everywhere. I can't think of a department that doesn't encounter stairs, and we just don't think about it. But you and I, we think about it quite a bit, and so that's so we're hoping to offer some tactical advice or some options, some things you can try, and mostly some things to think about when it comes to stairs and hose on stairs. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it's we're talking about uncharged hose. Deploying that on stairs is another completely different discussion. This is about moving hose already charged on stairs, however it got there.
Okay.
How to do that. And it made me think about it's like lifting, man. If you hear someone talk about the technique of a deadlift or a squat or a bench press, you can squat, you can bench press, you can deadlift. You may not have the best technique, you can get it done, but if you have good technique, you can lift more. And that's, I guess, kind of like a metaphor there for the hose is you can get it done, but you can move more quicker and more efficiently if you have better technique. It's not necessarily saying it's going to be easier. And I think that's a misunderstanding sometimes that comes up. It's like, if you have really good technique in benching, it's not necessarily easier when you're throwing up 315 pounds, but you can get to 315 because you have better technique and you're not stuck at 285. And that's really, when you think about this, I'm not saying it's easy. This isn't a hack, but there's principles and ways of doing it, systems that, can help you once you understand them and focus on them, that really come into play when you're tired.
Yeah.
So, and what we're trying to do is we're talking about, and what I realized when I really started digging into this, and it really started from having problems. I mean, this is something I realized I wasn't good at. It was a certain point in my career where I struggled. I had problems with it. I kind of lied to myself and thought I had it figured out, and hit me a few times where I was like, man, I'm not good at this. So I need to really figure this out. I need to go search out some videos, search out some people that can explain it to me, make me understand it, learn something, get better at it. And you're really trying to balance efficiency with also that word safety, but I'm talking about real safety, not just wearing your reflective vest. I'm talking about safety in the sense of getting injured and getting hurt, burnt, all that kind of stuff. So there's three things we're going to talk about is moving charged hose upstairs, moving charged hose lines downstairs, and then moving charged hose lines in a high rise or mid rise setting stairwell. So
Okay.
I guess we'll start with moving charged hose upstairs.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So what you have to understand is it's, like I said, it's going to be hard. So how do you start? Moving any hose starts with your friction points, understanding where they are. Usually when we start off, you're going to be taking the hose and loading it at the bottom of the stairs. And there's going to be a friction point, whether it's a railing or a doorway or something like that. So you have to load enough hose, hopefully past that friction point or right around it. And then you're going to have to move it up to the next level. So the nozzle, as they move up, you'll load hose at the bottom of the stairs of that run. And the nozzle person gets to as far as they can go. And then you're going to have to probably move more hose. And hopefully you have another firefighter helping you. But if you don't, sometimes that's just the way it is. You're going to have to go back and you're going to have to grab more hose and load it. So yeah, once you start loading hose, what can happen is you get a little, I don't know, overzealous, right? You get a little over the top and you start just kind of throwing stuff there, right? You're just like, I'm just throwing hose. I'm just boom, 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 boom. And if that nozzle isn't moving, if they're, flowing or they're stuck because maybe there's firefighters in front of them doing some kind of search or something like that, you can overload and make it hard to make the next move, right? Mm-hmm. Because that hose starts falling on top of itself. It just starts grabbing more things, chairs and things you can't see and tables and all that kind of stuff. So we basically realized we had to come up with some kind of rule for ourselves that there was like a point of we didn't want too much hose. So usually what we do when we teach a junior member is we say load twice. Mm-hmm. So you take hose, you have extra hose by the friction point, you load that so it's ready to move up. And then either that hose gets pulled up or moved up from there, you decide to move it up, or things are kind of in a holding pattern for whatever reason. You go back, you take more hose, and you load it a second time.
Okay. Just real quick, just in case there's a discrepancy in terminology,
yeah.
Can you describe what you mean by loading hose?
I guess I don't know. You can jump into if you can describe this better, but really, it's just you're creating a surplus. Yep. You're creating extra hose at that point, so you're moving more hose, pulling it or pushing it, whatever. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, if you can,
you're relocating it essentially.
Yeah, you're relocating it
to up close.
Yeah, you're relocating it to the friction point is where.
Right before the.
Yep.
And however that looks, I think a lot of people. I think obviously one of the cleanest and most efficient ways is to create loops, or what people would call loops. Mm-hmm. It doesn't always work out that way, honestly. I mean, in practice, if you're going real slow, you can make a loop, 2 loops, and those play out really nice. And I know people like to talk about, moving loops and things like that.
Yeah.
In real life, though, it doesn't have to be a perfect, pretty loop. And I think that's worth pointing out. It just has to be and I like that term you used, a surplus ready to be fed at a certain point.
Yeah. And I mean, the loops, we tend to not tell people to chase the loop. What I'm saying is try and create it, because what will happen is some people become so obsessed. Mm-hmm. They hear that early on in their career and they think that's the only way to do it. And they get so obsessed with making that loop, mm-hmm. thinking they have to. Yeah, it does a lot of times make it easier, but sometimes creating that loop can be a pain. Yeah. Also, they may need hose now. So you may not have time to
usually what happens.
Create that loop. And sometimes the loops just form by themselves. And if that happens, cool. Then, hey, just work it that way. Just roll that loop up higher until it pulls apart and straightens out. So it's one of those things where don't get too caught up in the loops. You gotta move the hose. You gotta keep things.
Yeah. So
rolling.
I think that's the best way to say it. So when we say loading hose, and I only point that out because we may have listeners from different departments. They might not know what we mean specifically by loading hose, but loading hose, let's go ahead and say, is creating a surplus prior to a friction point, however you accomplish that. The only other thing I want to point out real quick before you continue on, because we've seen this a couple of times when training this technique, we say load twice. That's a maximum.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that you must load
No,
twice.
you don't. No.
So because again, this is another one of those things where the hose is moving and we have people at a friction point further back and they feel like they have to load it twice before they can feed it. And that is absolutely not true. What ends up happening in reality is you kind of load just even like a little bit and then move that, and then load just a little bit and then move that, and then like you said, when you get a stoppage where the nozzle is flowing or something else is happening or there, whatever it is that cause it to stop moving, that's when you get this little brief moment that you may actually be able to load more hose.
Yeah.
And what we're saying is that you load twice, but no more than that if you have the time to do it. So if you have all the time in the world, don't just keep loading, a ton of hose at one friction point. 2 is the maximum.
Yeah. And I mean, as you say that, it makes me think about, maybe we'll talk a little bit about those decisions, because that's where a lot of people get caught up, especially if they don't have a lot of time or experience on it, whatever, an engine company or however it may be, or things start. Of course, you're going to start out practicing in, visibility where you can see. And then as time goes on, if you can, blacked out or smoked up training conditions are the best when you get to that point. And because everything gets different when you can't see, right? And there's all that adrenaline and everything else. So a lot of times what happens is there's 3 things you're dealing with, kind of 3 situations, right? You're loading hose, so you're actively doing that. So you take some hose, create a surplus at a friction point, ready to move it up to the next friction point. So you do that, right? And then you gotta decide, okay, so did that hose move forward? So if that hose moved forward, then you're probably going to have to go and you're going to have to create more hose. So you're going to have to get more surplus. You have to create more surplus, go back and get more surplus. But if you did that, like we talked about, you did that twice, now what do? You sit there, and some of the newer guys we were training, it's like, okay, so they load it twice and they just kind of hang out there. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, man, you can't hang out there, right? You got to go up. So you either got to go the span, what we call the span is between friction point and friction point. And usually the span on stairs is going to be from that flight of stairs. So it's the bottom of that flight of stairs, that group of stairs, up to the top of the group of stairs. And that may be a half landing, some other kind of landing. It's somewhere in that span between the 2 friction points, the top and bottom. You grab that hose, and then that's where you move it up to the next level. And then you got to figure out, maybe they went so far ahead that there's another surplus up there that you just need to work forward. So that's what you need to figure out once you load twice. And it's the best advice I can give people, and this is what I've figured out over time, is the way you make decisions in these situations, it's whatever keeps the line moving. So if you're not sure what you're doing, if you're not sure, like, do I go back and create more surplus? Do I move forward? A lot of times in zero visibility, you're not going to know what they're doing in front of you. So if the line is taut, then they probably are going to need more surplus moved forward, or it's caught on something. So you got to figure out what's going to move the line forward. It's probably going to be moving more surplus hose up. If it seems like there's extra already on the stairs, then maybe you have to work your way up and see if they need help at that next friction point. If it's a few different stairs, a few different spans of stairs, or maybe it's just a turn you have to go around. So just remember that when you're trying to make decisions, think about it as what can I do now that's going to move the nozzle forward because we want to keep the nozzle moving forward as much as possible. We don't want to let it stay stagnant until it gets to the point where it can actually start knocking the fire down. And then they're still going to need a little extra probably to hit different corners and sides of the room that was on fire.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And again, we're kind of breaking this down to a very analytical level, and we had a conversation actually before we started recording today that I think was good, and it was kind of about building the foundation for that. And we understand, and I think this is worth saying in this episode, is that we understand that some of these terms and things like that can start to feel a little academic, and that it's like, well, it doesn't matter what it's called. I just get in there and work. But truly, you have to trust us. We've worked on this a lot, and that yes, we admit sometimes all of that goes kind of out the window in a way where you get tired. And it's a hoarding house, or it's some crazy situation. Whatever. It doesn't always just look clean and academic like this. But if you build the foundations on these things, your sort of instincts start to be trained, and you start to fall back on things that actually will serve you, as opposed to just reaching like a drowning person for any which thing, which eventually can actually tire you out more. You talked about how, like, even when you're tired, you think to yourself, just go to the mid-span, grab some surplus at friction point. What's the next friction point? So again, and for me, because as you were talking then, I was thinking about how hard it is to do all this when you can't see at all.
Yes.
And that makes a really big difference, a really big difference. And you kind of have to learn to move by feel. Just like you said, you feel whether it feels like it's taut. Sometimes you have to find, slack. And I really do lean on these terms. And I kind of want to just review that real quick, which is friction points and span and mid-span. So friction point is anything that the hose gets caught on or has to go around, turn left, turn right, U-turn, things like that. Things where basically you go around and the bend of the hose gets caught on something and needs a little help moving around it. That's a friction point, right? And then span is the distance between two friction points. That could be really small or it could be really long. So, a flight of stairs in a high rise, that's maybe 10 feet between friction points, but that's still your span. Okay. That's your span between friction points. And again, it all sounds kind of academic, but it eventually turns into a system that is almost unbreakable of moving hose. So then you have friction points, span, and then you have mid-span. And mid-span is just the middle of any span. So if it is short, like a high-rise stairwell, 10 feet, then your middle is 5 feet in between, or roughly. It doesn't have to be exactly. If it's a long high-rise hallway, your span might be 50 feet long. And so the middle of it is somewhere around, 25 feet, whatever. So I wanted to go through and
yeah, and I mean, the other thing about the spans, I can't remember if I said this, but you want to try and use your legs as long as possible and reduce
that's huge.
your arms, the work that they have to do. So when you go to that midpoint on the span, you want to pick the hose up and you're using your arms just to hold the hose. The work is being done by your legs. So your legs are moving the hose up the stairs and then driving it past the friction point and then dropping it there and then making your next decision. What do you do? But try and hold back, pulling with your arms and moving with your arms, aside from like little finishing, like little turns, little techniques like that, because if you're going to be pulling a lot with your arms, you're going to gas out a lot quicker. They're, smaller groups of muscle. They just can't do as much. But if you're using your legs, you're keeping your arm strength in reserve for basically those finishing moves. Once you get to the point where you're moving around some corners or some objects in the fire area, fire compartment, and that's where you end up, especially because it gets real hard when you're on your knees, so you move the hose up you're kind of standing up, moving the hose up to the next floor. And then on that floor, you have to get down because that's the fire's right there. And the second story, whatever, the house. And you're on your knees now. So you end up using your hands a lot more. It's a lot harder. You can do the techniques, some of the techniques where you use your arm like a cable and you push with your feet.
It works pretty good.
It works good. But the problem, what happens is you're going to start, there's so much stuff in a lot of these houses that you can only go, 3 or 4 feet, and then you're just defaulting to kind of moving around it with your arms. So you're going to use a lot of arm strength real quick, usually once you get to whatever that floor is. So try your best outside when you're standing outside and maybe loading to the front door of the garden apartment or the, I guess really what I'm thinking about right now is like a single family house or, it could be in a garden apartment too. When you're moving that hose into the stairwell, outside's a perfect time to just grasp it at that mid-span on flat ground and walk it up to the door of the house or the garden apartment or whatever it is, because you can stand up and you can use your legs and you're not burning your arms out because you're going to need those, especially when it goes to, smoked up conditions.
Yeah. One of the things we say a lot, which I think is a good cue, is that as much as possible, you want to try to drive hose and not pull hose.
Yeah.
Or push it or not pull it. So, you take hose at that mid-span like you're talking about and you drive it forward with your legs as opposed to, just for imagery, since we're only listening here, is being at the top of stairs and pulling it. Now, again, full knowledge that sometimes you just have to do that.
It just makes sense.
You have to pull it.
Yeah.
You have to pull it. We're not saying that you can't use your arms. Sometimes you just have to pull it. Sometimes you're in a situation where you're tired and you're just retching it out for that last 5 feet of hose, and you do every which silly thing that your body could possibly muster at that moment.
But
and that's
every
fine.
time you have an opportunity to use your legs and not your arms, use your legs.
Think about it.
That's what you should always be looking for, that opportunity. Just like you're always using the decision of what's going to move the nozzle forward. That's the same kind of thing where if I have the opportunity to use my legs and just drive it with my legs and hold on to the hose with my hands, that's what I'm going to do. And I know we were talking about it earlier. When you get tired, a lot of times that's when it really matters, because you're like, I know this technique works and I'm going to keep doing it, where I just grasp it with my arms and I drive it and move it with my legs, and I know that technique works. I'm starting to gas out, but this way I can keep the line moving.
Yep, keep the line moving. And I think, honestly, this is getting me excited because I like this stuff. We could probably do a whole episode on just the foundation mechanics of moving hose, which is what we're kind of talking about right now. But this episode, we're talking specifically about stairs because of the particular challenges. And I know that is, personal to you. And you were sort of motivated to do this episode specifically because of stairs and how much you felt we needed to have that conversation. So let's, as much as I'd love to go on to all the little finishing moves and techniques for moving hose, let's bring it back to stairs. So we were talking about moving charged hose line upstairs. I think we sort of diverted at load twice, meaning, that's surplus. What else about?
I think another thing to remember is vertical hose. It's easy to see on ladders, but also on stairs. What'll happen is when you in our, I guess, excitement to keep the hose moving sometimes, what'll happen is that hose will end up going vertical, where it's not leaning on the stairs anymore. It's just going straight up to the next level, and maybe it's going over a railing or something like that. And you can do this for yourself and see how hard this is. When the hose is actually laying on the stairs, the weight of the hose, some of that is being held up by the stairs because it's laying on it. And when it's going vertical, you're taking the full weight of the hose with the water in it, and you're trying to push that hose up or pull it over, whatever you're trying to get it over. It's so much harder to do that. If you've ever experienced the two back to back, try one where it's on the stairs and move it up one level, rest a little so it's, you have a fair comparison, and then try to do it vertical where you're pushing or pulling the hose up. It's so much harder when the hose ends up going vertical. And sometimes it happens where people get really excited and they send it vertical thinking they're making things easier. Oh, because it's less distance.
Right. Well, and also I think this is, I see a lot of very over anxious rookies who learn the well stretch, right? Which is the thing that they teach. And for some reason, I guess that well stretch was when you learn it in rookie school is like a better option if you can do it. And they learn how to check the well with your fist to see if there's enough room and all that stuff. But what are you saying about it? How should we think about the well stretch?
I think it's a misunderstanding that the well stretch, when people talk about that stretch, which usually means prior to being charged.
Mm-hmm.
So they're talking about dry hose.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're deploying dry hose, or you don't have, you make a calculated decision where you're like, I don't know if I have enough hose, you can start going to that. But what you really want to do is, if you're going to do that, you do it dry and then have extra hose prior to it being charged in some kind of area that is safe to have dry hose. So whether that's a floor below where you load a bunch of hose and you have a big U, or whatever it is, or it's behind a closed door on the fire floor or something like that. When you think about that well hole stretch, a lot of times it's really the dry hose that you're moving, because it's incredibly hard to move charged hose in that situation. It really is. I mean, if you've done it, you know what I'm talking about. And sometimes it can be impossible almost without, at least two people, if not more, to help it. And as that distance increases, the number of stories or feet, it's so hard. So that well hole stretch is really a dry stretch. It's not for charged line that you're moving. It's for stagnant line that already has a surplus in a certain place and it's been charged. And, you think about that, even in a lot of these books they talk about tying it off so it doesn't slide back down. Because what does the weight of the order want to do? It wants to pull everything back down. So they talk about tying it off somehow. Do people do that all the time? No. So it's, just one of the other things that wanted to point out there. That's a little confusion.
Yeah. So when you're moving hose, moving it vertically is very difficult. We do talk about, if you need to recover maybe 5-10 extra feet at the very end, and, putting it in over like
a railing, because you're cutting that corner,
which is a little different.
That's a finishing move.
It's a finishing move.
That's not I'm going up another 2 stories.
Right, and that's the point here.
Yes,
that's what I want to point out is that when you're moving hose, which is what we're talking about today, moving charged hose on stairs. If you see that happen, you almost have to fix it. You have to put it back on the stairs. If you see it, whatever, the guy in front of you gets a little overzealous, starts pulling too much hose up, and it starts picking up and going on the rail, you now have to get a surplus and get that hose back down onto the stairs, because that's the easiest way to move it, right?
Yeah. So, I guess that's about it for the going upstairs.
Okay.
Do we want to move to downstairs?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
What do you got?
Yeah, so, downstairs, physically, it's always going to be easier, right? Because you have gravity to help. But there's a few things you need to think about. So, especially in these situations where it's, the single-family dwellings, the garden, or not necessarily, it could be garden apartments also. But I guess what I'm thinking of is where you have a basement in a single family dwelling or a townhouse or something like that, and you're getting ready to go down the stairs. It's dangerous enough because you don't know, you're above the fire, right? If there's no access, because the better option is at grade finding exterior access, but sometimes that isn't the case. So everyone needs to be on the same page, and this is one of those things that's probably worth practicing. And we probably should practice it more than we do and talk about it more. So is you need that surplus has to be ready. So you got to get that surplus. And I would say, in all honesty, you probably need to load twice in that situation, almost as a rule. I'm not going to say it's a rule, because there's so many different pieces and things going on, but that's really what you want to aim for. You want to load twice, have a surplus of hose right there at the top of the stairs, ready to go. So once you're ready to go, if you have to, you can flow the nozzle down there, cool things off, reset things if possible. Maybe, you can't even see anything, so you're not sure, you got to get down there. But when you're ready to go, everyone has to be on the same page as far as we got to get down there. We can't stop on the stairs. And now if it's a situation where you're flowing and you're going down, maybe, but you really want to get down there, because what is it? It's like a chimney, right? You have all that stuff coming up. You're in a bad spot. You don't have, until you're down at a lower level, you don't have the best angles to flow water and everything else. So Load twice. That's what we're shooting for. Make sure everyone's ready, and then go get to the bottom of the stairs. And you're going to need enough hose to make that first turn fairly quick, because you can get to the bottom of the stairs, and then you could be facing, a lot of times in buildings, you're facing a wall in front of you. So yeah, okay, the nozzle's down at the base of the stairs, but what now? I really can't flow it behind me or anything like that. So make sure that everyone's ready to do work, and you can at least get that first turn, so you can give them a good position where they can flow water wherever they need to, kind of to create like a little beachhead to then move from. So it's a little different in that sense, where I would say you're really leaning towards the load twice. Make sure you move on the stairs, but it should be easier because it's going down, and you're not moving the hose up, so you're kind of just feeding it down there. And then once you get down, try and make that turn and move on the fire or the suspected fire area as soon as possible. So, and when you get down there, sometimes it can be a little confusing. You get down there and you're not sure exactly where you need to go. So maybe the officer gets down there right behind the nozzleman and kind of figures out, says, hold up a second, let me take a look on the thermal imager. Let me kind of feel some stuff out. Or maybe you have a truck company that then operates in front of you and they start figuring stuff out, and you may just have to stay there. Well, what's happening now? Guy at the top needs to load again. They probably should load twice again, if possible, so they can make that move. And once they load twice, like we said, you got to decide, well, what do I do now? What do I do now? How do you make that decision? They may have to call down there and say, hey, do you need more hose? Because maybe when they're at the bottom of the steps there, they make that turn, and then there is a surplus of hose that moved to the bottom of the steps, but it can't get around that friction point. Mm-hmm. So you may think, I'm good up here, right? Mm-hmm. I load it twice. I'm good up here. I'm just hanging out. But if you can't tell if they're moving, or it just seems like they're kind of stagnant, you have a surplus there. So you may have to go down those stairs until you reach them, or you can hear them or call out to them and say, hey, you need more hose. What you may find is that pile of hose at the bottom that needs to be moved forward. Yeah. So it's still a very dynamic position. The person that's loading hose and everything else, it's, even though you're going down, you still could have that problem where it's just a pile at the bottom there. Yeah. And you don't want to send more down. You don't want to even, here's another loop. And then that's the worst thing. Then we got tons of stuff down there, and it's like, what are we doing? Yeah. So
I'd say one thing I'd like to point out when we're talking about going downstairs, because I've just seen it so often, is as the second person, if you're feeding hose to that person, you really have to work on that feel and kind of feel when they need it, because going downstairs, it's actually so easy that you can actually push somebody downstairs. That backup person can get a little overzealous, and they can start pushing the nozzle too far. Now, that being said, too, try to make sure you keep up too, because going down a short flight of stairs into a basement or something like that, it can happen pretty quickly, because the nozzleman can pretty much grab on the nozzle and ride the stairs down like a sled, so it can go pretty quick. But there may be some reason why they stop at some point. Yeah. Obviously we don't want to stop on stairs, but you never know. It could be, like you said, one of those turns or something. Mm-hmm. We've seen them where there's like a little landing that then goes off a different direction, and you don't want to be pushed by that person. So again, it becomes a matter of feel, which is actually, it's hard to talk about now, but when you do it, it's actually way more intuitive than it sounds. You can actually kind of really feel it. But I like what you said about that, about, maybe it's not a hard and fast rule, but if you can, staging before you go downstairs so that you have enough ready to make the stairs, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. And one thing I've noticed that also works, a little thing is, as far as getting hose, maybe you fed some hose down there. What can help too is like a little vertical U against the wall. Yes. If you have that little vertical U right at the top of the steps ready to go down, it also helps gauge, because if that can get pulled out real quick and easily by so you can kind of tell if that vertical U against the wall,
and they eat that up.
It's like, whoa, they're moving. Yeah. But if you have that vertical U against the wall and it sits there, that's kind of a point where you're like, maybe I need to call down, or I need to go down there and kind of do a, face to face in the dark.
And maybe they made the fire,
Maybe they made the fire. You don't want to send too much down there.
That's really good. And that just could, like, you saying that, I've seen that. That's real life. Is that vertical U that gets eaten up where it doesn't, and that's kind of an indicator. You can't always see it again,
but you can feel it.
A lot of times when it has to do with basement fires and stuff, there is some level of visibility where the people are moving hose, even though there may not be where the nozzle min is. So
sometimes, but I mean, I've been on one where it's the second we go through the front door on the first floor, it's blackout all the way till fire's out, and we ventilate it for a while. So it can be hit or miss what you're going to run into. The other thing is about overloading. Think about it. If, say, they do find, hey, someone sleeping in the basement or someone unconscious, trying to bring them up with a ton of hose on the stairs, it's going to make it real hard. Add a firefighter to that. Something happens to a firefighter, you got to bring the firefighter up. And as hard as it is to move us on stairs, if you've done those drills, you add some hose on that stairs. It's so hard, because now the hose that's maybe protecting you from keeping a fire in check is also an obstacle of moving a heavy firefighter up a narrow staircase. So overloading that with a bunch of stuff, because I'll see it sometimes, it's like an explosion of hose, and you're like, dude, what? Like, if we need to get out of there fast or get someone out, it's going to be so hard. You've created a problem by being overzealous. So there's kind of that happy middle ground you got to constantly chase.
There is, and I feel like we talk about that a lot because I think the default, and I know we'll get a lot of pushback from this, but the default is to just move as much hose towards the object as possible. And I understand the idea of that, but it creates more problems than it solves. Yeah. And this is a good example of a time when that might be. If you get way too much hose pushed forward, even if it's not on the stairs, even if it's just right at the top of the stairs, like you said, trying to get a firefighter or a civilian rescue up those stairs into that mess of hose is, it's giving me, it's making me sweat just thinking about it.
It's going to be a beating.
It's going to be a beating.
It's going to be a beating.
All right. So that's good. I think that's a good section on moving downstairs. And our last thing we want to cover is specifically high-rise and mid-rise stairwells, which are their sort of own unique challenge and have some particular talking points. So
there's the stuff. I guess we've been doing some drills in our department and some stuff recently that realizing, talking with some people, there may be some misunderstandings or things that haven't been talked about that are important to understand. And again, these are from problems that we've had that you see over time, and also been exposed to other things you read and hear where you're like, that could catch up with you eventually. So one of the things is, again, there's no, like I said, just like lifting weights, right? You have good technique, you're gonna lift more weight. It's still gonna be work though. There isn't a hack that's gonna make this easy where you're not gonna notice it. Moving hose is hard, but there's efficient ways to do it. And there's also things, as we've been talking about, you have to take into account that can bite you. You can get yourself in trouble. So one of the debates that has come up is hose above the fire floor. So when you're deploying that hose and then it gets charged, hose above the fire floor, is it going to make the job easier physically? Yeah, it'll make the job easier. If I have hose, some people bring, I've heard 100 feet of hose up there. It's a lot of hose, right? And it's going to be easier. But the problem with that is, does it take into account all the things that happen in real life? So in these buildings, unlike even you could say a garden apartment, but especially single family, townhouse, row house, stuff like that, I don't have a lot of people coming down typically. Once we get in there, you're not going to have people exiting, these stairs typically. Maybe a little bit in a garden apartment, but that stops pretty quick. But in a high rise or a mid rise, and this didn't, I guess I didn't take this into account, like how big of a deal this can be, until we had a fire on the second floor of a high rise, and we were just trying to make our way through the lobby, because now you have the whole building trying to come down, instead of if you have, say, a 10-story high rise or higher and it's towards the upper floors, you only have a few floors above it that may be evacuating. And depending on how the building is, how smoke travels in it and everything else, the alarms go off and all that, you can have a lot of people wanting to get out. So our situation we came across is you had so many people coming out. So really trying to stretch that hose in the stairwell created a lot of issues and made it a lot harder. So the other thing that happens is if you're in a situation where it's the safe option is to have charged hose on the floor below and then go through the fire floor door that's above you versus having some kind of control on the fire floor where you have control of the door, maybe it's not smoked up, something like that, or sprinkler knocks it down, is once you open that door to the stairwell, you're going to have that smoke starting to enter the stairwell. So you're going to have, it's going to pollute the stairwell. Worst case scenario is some other doors open, either at the top or whatever, some flow path situation or something. But you're going to have smoke in that stairwell. And what happens is now your visibility is going to diminish. So trying to, if you have all that hose above the fire floor landing, it easily can get caught in the railings. It can get caught on all different things and the friction points, and it's hard to figure out what's going on. So now you're sending someone, think about this, you're sending someone in the more likely hotter part of the stairwell where they're going to have to go up and they may have to take a beating to get the hose out and get it straight to keep it moving. Or worst case scenario, you have fire vent into that stairwell. And I mean, there's been historical stuff where there's been fires in different cities across the country where they had issues with the standpipe discharge on the fire floor landing. And that created some catastrophic events, some line of duty deaths. Now we're talking about stretching hose above the fire floor landing. So it's one of those things like, yeah, it may work. It may work better when I have good visibility or a little bit of smoke or, nothing else trying to come after me and bite me like fire. But if it does happen, you're in a very, very bad spot that's going to be very hard to overcome. And is it worth that to
make it
easier versus it is going to be harder? But you got to weigh efficiency and also true safety, not reflective vest safety, but true safety, where you may have to work a little harder, but it's safer. And then the other thing is that hose, sometimes it doesn't work out the way you want. That hose all kind of folds on top of each other.
There's way more fail points.
And you're working so hard to get that hose untangled versus a nice stretch where you're going to have to do a little work.
I mean, the point is like, right, if it goes perfectly, then yes, it's easier. But you're relying on it going perfectly. I would rather have something that is robust and accounts for everything. And the other thing I just kind of think about while you were talking about, if you need sort of an emotional connection to this, is you put a bunch of hose in the stairs in a high rise, and there's people trying to come down and get out.
Yeah,
the people that we're trying to protect, but we put hose in their way. Why? Because it's easier for us. So you're making it easier for us, but harder for them, the people we're trying to save. Okay, maybe that's a little dramatic, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't love this line of thinking of looking for hacks and making it easier. Yeah. Now, should we do something that is hard for no reason? Absolutely not. No, I'm always looking for ways to make something more efficient, or if you want to use the word, easier. But to me, this is easier because it accounts for so many situations built in. It has built-in account for the blackout conditions on the stairs, heat on the stairs, people on the stairs, whether that be civilians or other fire companies, and
entanglement with the
entanglement on the rail. So I mean, you can. There's a couple things, maybe even some things that we haven't talked about it. I mean, the point is, and to go back to a phrase that I've heard you say often, which is stairs are a trap.
Yeah.
Right. And that doesn't mean that they have to be avoided at all costs. Sometimes you can't avoid them. Obviously, I mean, that's the point of this episode is that stairs come up a lot.
Yeah.
But they present a unique challenge. And so if there is a reasonable way to minimize their role in the operation, then I think we should do that.
Yeah. And I mean, another thing is like we talked about, what if they're trying to bring a person down from the floor above and you have that just massive hose? it makes it harder again. It's one of those things that it doesn't. It's not a problem until it is, but when it's a problem, it's like a catastrophic problem. It's a major problem, a make or break problem. So,
And I mean, I think part of that is, and we've touched on this, part of that is the fallacy of the training environment, right?
Yeah.
Because we train these things without
Usually
people,
no
where you
people.
can full visibility, things like that. And, and again, we're not being unreasonable. I'm not saying that every single call is going to present all of these things. And a lot of people are like, well, yeah, but 9 out of 10 times I can get away with this. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I think the point is that we just want to practice something that has fewer ways to break and break down, and that way we're practiced at that.
Another point to all these situations where you're moving hoses, for most of the country, most of us, the officers, you got to do work.
Okay, that's a good point.
This isn't, there's maybe there's like the FDNY or something where they have staffing of 4 firefighters and officers, so 5 people on an engine. I mean, maybe that's not even all the time for them, but most places you're talking 3 to 4 people total, including the officer. So you have to do work as an officer. This isn't a sit back situation. You're going to be part of the operation. So you have to practice this, and you may be in one of the hardest positions, right behind the nozzle, moving hose, which is most likely where you're going to be. So you got to practice it. And then that brings up, well, how do we practice it? And one of the best things, I know everyone doesn't have this, but if you can find some kind of parking garage or something like that, if you have a training facility, that's great. But if you have like a parking garage, you don't even have to have a hydrant. Just pull the hose, charge it, and then just work it up through the parking garage. You don't have to flow it. Another great spot is some of these garden apartments that have the open stairwells. Like the breezeway ones are great, or just an open stairwell. Just make sure your couplings are tight. Just go through there and move it up a floor or two. And, maybe sometimes they don't like that so much. So you maybe do it one complex, you roll to another one, apologize, be real nice. Sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness. So think about that. Try and find some spots where you can find stairs that you can just practice moving hose on. You don't need that hydrant. Just charge the line and do it. It's the value you get from that, because we don't have a lot of places where we can practice that aside from a fire. A lot of times in our first due, our areas. So use those opportunities, look for those. It's just you just gain so much from actually putting your hands on the hose and moving it, and just instead of just like what we're doing, talking about it, go out there and do it as much as possible.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm glad you made that before we moved on, which is that the officer has to get involved. I want to ask you one last question, and then maybe I'll tell a story if I feel like it. What's wrong with, why do we have to talk about this so much? Why do we have to use terminology like midspan and move with your legs, when I think a lot in recruit school, at least, and this goes back to your time and my time, but also even still today, we don't put a lot of emphasis on a system for moving hose. We say, just move it. What's wrong with that mentality and that approach to moving hose? Is just muscle it out, just get it done. Why do we have to put so much work into a system for it?
I mean, it's hard. It's one of the harder things we do, but I think we tend to get away with things. I mean, we tend to, it goes back to, I probably have said this on here, but I say it a lot. We're as a whole, the fire departments across the country, a lot of times we're luckier than we are good. I mean, you think about it, think about how many mistakes you make and nothing catastrophic happens. So sometimes you make some little mistakes, sometimes some big ones, but for the most part, we get through it, we get away with it. We do understand, I think, to some degree that it's hard. And then do we walk away from it, and do you ask yourself, could it have gone better? What could I do differently? We kind of, I think a lot of people get through it. And I say this again all the time, it's one of the worst things you can say is the fire went out, everyone went home. I mean, I hate that saying. That's what we want, right? We want Yeah, we want the fire to go out. That's what we're supposed to do. And I want everyone to go home. I want the civilians to go home. I want the firefighters to go home. But when you say that or imply that or think about that after the fact for us, for the fire department, that it kind of, most of the time, think about it when it's said. It's usually this like, well, we had some problems, but we got it done, right? And then you just walk away. You're on to the next thing. But do you go back and think about, well, hey, that gave me a problem. How can we improve that? Is there someone out there teaching something that can be useful to me? Can I find that? Is there another company that, has had the same problem? Do we just need to go out and do it and figure out what works for us? So I think we get through it. These are always chaotic situations. Just like everyone always says, oh, communication's always a problem. It's because it's hard. It's chaotic. But I think we get through it and we get a little complacent and we get the job done. And we think getting that ball across the goalpost of just the fire going out, we were right. We were validated in what we did instead of actually thinking about, well, what could have went wrong? What did I luck out? Well, if there's a fire there, or if this window was broken or that had happened, this would have been catastrophic. So I don't know. I think we fool ourselves sometimes.
Should I tell a story?
Yeah, I think stories are good.
All right. I mean, here's the thing. I've been like wrestling whether I want to tell a story or not because it's a war story essentially. And
can someone learn from it? If they can learn from it, then tell it.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you can. It involves stairs, which is what made me think about it. It involves stairs in an interesting way, I guess. But I kind of feel like unless you're Paul Hashhagen, I don't care about your war stories, so I don't expect you to care about mine. And I don't want this to turn into a podcast where we just tell war stories. But I'm just going to tell. Yeah, I guess it's not so much a lesson as it is like a good lens on how much stairs can affect an operation. So this was when I was a rookie. This is actually my first fire, and it was in our first due. It was maybe 2 blocks down from the firehouse, but we were out shopping at the time. So we end up being second due, and of course we're pissed. We're like, oh my gosh, and the reports are coming in, multiple callers, smoke, all of that, and we're like, oh, what are the chances? There's a fire right down the street from our firehouse. Well, we get there, and unfortunately, we were second due. And actually, this story has a lot of sub stories, but I'll try to keep it focused on the element of the stairs. So, what was sort of interesting about this fire is it ended up being balloon frame construction. So when we get there, there's smoke coming out of what looks like the eaves and the attic. So we're second due, and of course we're not happy about it. We pull a backup line, get to the front door. So the way the house is built is it's kind of an interesting grade, but there's stairs that go all the way up to the front door. So that's stairs number one. We have to essentially stretch line and figure out how to incorporate these stairs to get to the front door. Then we go in the front door, and it's one of those houses where almost as soon as you open the front door, you go into the stairs to go up. So the first company takes their line. We pull a second line, get it charged, and it kind of sits at the front door, and we assist moving this line up the stairs. And when I tell you there was what felt like 10 people just crammed in this tiny little old construction stairwell, which are very narrow, by the way. I mean, it felt like people were literally on top of each other. And so we get the line all the way up, and I'm at the back of this. Like you said, I'm a rookie. I'm at the back of this whole thing, just trying to like get in there. They get to the top and they say, the fire's not up here. We got to back up. So me and this other firefighter, the reason why our officer was not with us is one of the sub stories of this, which I won't tell right now, but it was myself and another firefighter were at the end of this line, but then we backed out first, got onto the landing of the front door. The chief was there, and he saw that we had pulled our line as a backup line and said, take this line and find the basement. Okay, so We've gone up a set of stairs to get to the front door. We go in the front door. We go up a set of stairs. We come back down those stairs. We get this line, and now we got to go find another set of stairs to go to the basement, which we do because thankfully it's, as you know, these constructions are, the stairs down are, you know, close to the stairs up. So we take this line. We go back in. At this point, it's starting to get pretty smoky, pretty hot. We get to the top of the basement stairs and we find the fire. It's actually in the basement. And of course, because it was balloon frame construction, it presented like it was an attic fire. And so then we open that door to the basement. It's hot. It's smoky. I start flowing. I shut it down. I start moving down the stairs and it starts to get real hot again. But the problem is that they're like open stairs, you know, no walls there. Just kind of boards, you know, on stringers. And then the fire's behind me, essentially, under the stairs. So there's like a triangle where the wall, you know, is, and the stairs are going down. And I'm trying to do this weird thing. And I just think about it all the time because we talk about all these techniques and stuff. And like we say, sometimes you just do whatever you can. So I'm kind of twisting in this weird way to get water behind me to cool it down and blah, blah, blah. End up putting the fire out and going down and finishing it off and everything. But it made me think of that. And by the way, just again, not related to this conversation, but it turns out that it started in basically there was a garage under the house that was kind of because like I said, the grade was all kind of weird. So the garage was like under the house. If somebody had done a good walk around lap, they would have discovered that we could have put this fire out from an exterior entrance into the garage. But that's neither here nor there. I guess the point, the reason I thought of this story today is because of the insane amount of stairs that were involved in it. There's stairs that go up to the front door. You go in the front door, you go upstairs. Turns out it was not up there. We come back down the stairs. We go back in and go downstairs to the basement. So it just made me think of it because of all the stairs involved.
Well, it's a good example too of like what you said about the open stairs where they're open to what's behind it. So as you go down there, like we talked about, making that turn is huge. So if they can make that turn, they can actually put some mortar on behind them where the fire is, because you're going to feel that if there's, you know, it's just the steps themselves without the backing. So yeah, that's a great example of that, how critical that is. Make that turn and get some mortar on that fire. So yeah.
And like I said, the point of today was talk about moving charged hose line on stairs. I think if you start connecting some pieces together from other episodes, kind of like our garden apartment one, becomes evident how important the stretch is. You know, the stretch sets up moving charged hose line, because if it stretches well, it charges well. And you can, you know, move it cleanly and everything. So hopefully we're starting to sort of paint a picture overall of all this stuff. So I hope my war story wasn't too boring.
That's good.
All right. So anything else on moving charged hose on stairs?
No. I think that sums it up. Just, hey, check out the Fireground Company membership. We do an insider podcast, and we talk about leadership and the how. That's what we're really trying to focus on, the how of leadership. You can read a lot of things about concepts and ideas, but does it talk about the how? And we just did an insider podcast where you have the ability to submit questions, and there was a really good question, and it got to what I realized was the essence of leadership, in the fire department. And until I heard it, it just struck me. I'm like, wow, this is it. So that's the kind of stuff we deal with. And it's a mentorship in a way, and it can really jump you ahead, where we talk about a lot of things that I've screwed up myself or I've figured out that can jump you 5 to 10 years ahead as far as understanding leadership, how to talk to people, how to make decisions, which are so important in this job. So check that out at firegroundcompany.com.
All right. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for stopping by. Check us out at firegroundcompany.com. You'll find links to all our social media accounts and our YouTube channel, and you'll stay up to date on everything we're working on. We also have a store on our website where you can support us as we grow this community, plus working on some great courses to help you strengthen your leadership in the fire department and support its traditions and culture. Last but not least, subscribe to the podcast, give us a rating, leave a comment, spread the word, get this out to the firefighters who are hungry to make the job even better.
The Fireground Company Podcast.